Hello and welcome to this video on bonsai potting mix. Unlike most potted plants, bonsai have unique requirements when it comes to the kind of soil they will or will not thrive in. This means that every bonsai to some degree has unique aspects to the medium in which you plant it, grow it, and train it. Let's look at a standard potting mix first for comparison. Your average mix is meant for pots, is somewhat coarse, but with a large amount of fine material. It tends to fall into one or the other category. The fine particles retain moisture and the large particles give mass. By contrast to this, a premium brand of potting mix is made of more middling components and looks dark, rich, and consistent. This will also be denser than an economy mix, which helps in retaining moisture. Bonsai mixes are rather unlike this, as they first and foremost need to drain freely without clinging onto much moisture. If this were to happen, your bonsai would effectively drown. Interestingly, overwatering is also one of the leading causes of bonsai death. Despite this, you still need a mix that will support the tree and retain a little water, or it will not function as a growth medium. For these reasons, most bonsai potting mixes are composed of 4 components: organic matter, such as compost and peat moss, inorganic matter like perlite and sand. Each of these examples serves a primary and several secondary functions. First of these is the organic matter, which can come in several forms: compost, clay, muck, standard potting mix, or similar. This is a source of carbon. It provides the tree with the raw building materials to grow. It also adds mass, water retention, and structure. Rather obviously, photosynthesizing plants need carbon for photosynthesis and the consequential growth. Without this basic need met, your tree will not grow. This is the primary role of organic matter. The organic matter also adds mass, which keeps the tree in place. Too light and the tree will twist and turn in the breeze, or pull out of the pot entirely. Too heavy and it will crush the tree slowly but surely. Organic matter will also retain some water. It does hold on to this moisture as well as other components, and, as a consequence, it will help in getting water into the mix, but will not hold it for very long. This does not matter, as other components take over once water is present in adequate quantities. Finally, there is structure. The roots that will feed and water the tree need something to hold them in place. Organic matter plays part of this role. Peat moss performs a large part of the structural aspect, along with retaining moisture and reducing weight. Peat moss is, as the name suggests, a moss, and it is used in bonsai mixes because it readily absorbs water while engorging slightly. The benefit of this is that it takes up excess or draining water from the potting mix and gradually leaches water out of the organic matter. This allows it to act as a sort of sponge, which keeps the tree watered for longer periods of time. Secondary to this is the way it acts as a sort of binding agent. Being moist and being mixed in with everything else, the peat moss holds the potting mix together. Finally, while holding everything together, it helps to support the roots. Think of peat moss as being like cement. It does not hold the building itself together, but it does hold the parts of the building together. Perlite is somewhat an opposite to this. Perlite is an inorganic compound made by heating obsidian until it pops like popcorn. This produces a light white gravel-like material which is extremely light. This is used to allow for the free movement of oxygen and water. Water will go into bonsai mix and displace oxygen. As the water drains around and over the perlite, it leaves a cavity which is filled by air. This air allows for the tree to grow roots, which in turn improve tree health. This is also an incredibly light material by comparison to other components in the mix, and because of its slight bulk, it allows the pot to be very light, by comparison to regular potting mix, which is much denser. This works because perlite breaks up the mesh of organic materials like compost and peat moss. Without this, water would become stuck in the organic material, and the plant would drown. Finally, there is sand. Sand serves a similar purpose to perlite as an inorganic compound, but is significantly smaller, which allows it to disperse throughout the mix and create points of nucleation. This is where the water will condense and eventually be pulled away by gravity. Sand also breaks up the organic matter, allowing the roots of the tree to penetrate and grow into the organic material. These are 4 of the common components, and they are not the sole options available, but they are common core ingredients. Other options that occur frequently in recipes for potting mix are pine bark, macadamia, small gravel, and commercial fertilizers. These are used to provide the 3 main features of good bonsai potting mix: low compaction, free draining, and good air penetration. All of this is not to say that you cannot or should not make your own potting mix, but it gets a little tricky. There are many recipes available on the internet or from books. The problem here is that you'll get a variety of recipes or variations based on who you ask, when you ask, and what they are growing. A good rule for your trees is to look at the circumstances the trees grow in naturally. Rather obviously, evergreens grow anywhere, and you want to balance this in your potting mix. Deciduous trees tend to be a little bit fussier, and flowering plants are truly fastidious. When you are making your own potting mix, consider the demands the plant will put on the soil. A slow-growing evergreen may not need to be repotted every 2 years, whilst a flowering shrub may need it. This means you need to select components that match with the expected life cycle of the plant. For example, macadamia breaks down after about 2 years, and should not be used with plants that will not need repotting in this time frame. Meanwhile, lava rock and some gravel is long-lasting and would suit trees that have a long time between repotting. Being aware of the materials used in bonsai potting mix is even more specific. Most mixes, when they are made by an individual, are sifted to separate differently sized components. As an example, the inorganic gravel or rock type components of your mix will have dust mixed into them as part of the creation and transport process. This is of no use to you or the tree, and can cause the drainage to become clogged. This is why you sift out the very small and very large components. You can further separate it into smaller and medium-sized parts, and medium to larger sized parts for different sized bonsai. Once you have processed your components, you can look at combining them to create your bonsai potting mix. In most cases, you're looking at creating a mix that will be split between the organic and inorganic elements. The first half is organic, and will have compost or similar alternatives making up things in the range of 60 and 90% of the total volume. The remainder will be made from peat moss or your alternative of choice. Next is the inorganic element. You want between 1/3 and half to be the gravel or rock type substrate of your choice. You then want perlite or similar to make up another 1/3, and finally sand or similar free draining and aerating material to finish the organics. These components, as a percentage, can be shifted about a little, with more or generally less water retention or aeration to create a mix which will not readily compact. Now you combine the 2 halves of your inorganic and organic components to create a mix. You can decide on what you consider a good mix, but a convenient rule of thumb is to squish the mix in your hand. See how well it holds a shape. If the mix stays in shape, you need more aeration. If it is squishy and moist, it really needs more aeration. If it falls apart immediately, it needs more organic material. A good mix will hold its shape with a little water and pressure, but fall apart if manipulated. Another good test is to see if birds come along and dig up your trees. If they can, then you know the mix is a good balance, and that you have another problem to fix with your bonsai. This last section relied heavily on a range of values, as each person has developed their own slightly unique or very unique recipe, and you'll need to test the mix you create and see how your trees manage before deciding on one in particular. The other thing to be aware of is that some commercial manufacturers will change their recipe over time. Therefore, you should always be aware of and be prepared to deal with changes in their recipe with your trees. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it useful, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.